Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend, Alexander Carr, Sydney Sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week we talk about new emoji, Amazon, gambling systems, and Pokémon Go. So Alex, we got some feedback this week on Twitter informing us that Microsoft Paint isn't actually going away entirely. While it will be taken out of the next iteration of Windows 10, it will be available on the Windows 10 store, available to install separately from the operating system, should one choose to.
Well, honestly, that's good news because, as we have previously discussed, I have and do use Microsoft Paint from time to time. I think it's a big part of people's childhoods as well. Everyone who you talk to about Microsoft Paint has a story about using it in their childhood to, draw stick figures or whatever. So I think it's good that they're keeping it around. But I mean, obviously, they do need to move forward, and I think they made the right step here.
Yeah, separating it out from the operating system, I think, does make sense. I'm surprised they didn't actually do this move earlier, I suppose, to have it bundled with the operating system. Like a graphics program is kind of bizarre in a way.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that it lives on because, like I said in the previous episode, I don't think it's going to take them much to actually keep it going forward. Just maintaining it. So yeah, I think that's the best decision all around.
Well, that's exactly it, and it will die out eventually, I suppose, because it is fairly archaic technology already.
Yeah.
But I suppose there's a lot to be said about a simple kind of program like Microsoft Paint for people who just want to sit around and draw stick figures on their computer.
Absolutely. So if you're wondering where it's gone in the next iteration, I don't know whether it will be uninstalled if you upgrade or whether it will just keep going. But if it does go missing at some point, just know you can find it on the Windows 10 store.
Very good news, I think. Very good news.
Yes.
And also our first bit of feedback on a social media platform.
Yes, absolutely. So keep that coming in if there's anything that you want to tell us.
By Bob Potato. Oh my gosh.
Keep up the great work, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your feedback.
Something else that we've been talking about a lot and has become a bit of a trend for this podcast, for whatever reason, is emoji. And there's some new emoji that are potentially coming up for review and will be decided on what is going to be in for the next release come 2018. And a couple of those that stood out to me were, first and foremost, the kangaroo, which I know we talked about was one that the fact that it's missing is just crazy. So hopefully that one gets in. Also a frowning pile of poo for some reason. People do love their poo emoji.
For good reason. It's a very important part of people's lives.
There's also potentially a fire extinguisher and a test tube. And the list goes on. There's bone, leg, foot, tooth. A lot of different parts of the anatomy.
One thing that's really stuck out to me on this list is a woman's flat shoe.
A woman's flat shoe, yes.
Flat shoe. Not to be mistaken with a woman's high-heeled shoe.
Well, I guess that was missing. I don't know who was crying out for it exactly, but...
I do actually have a question around the criteria for emojis. Could you have an emoji of something that's associated with a brand, such as a Pokémon?
Potentially. I mean, I don't see why you couldn't. You would just have to convince the consortium that there was a decent amount of value in adding that particular logo or whatever. I think Pokemon is probably a good example of that. You could have a Pokeball or something. That's probably saturated in civilization to such an extent you could probably make a decent justification for it. But again, I guess because the rights are actually held by the Pokemon company, you would have to get their agreement that you could use that sort of... the process would be a bit more involved.
Right, okay, that's interesting. Samantha did actually request that we make a formal request to add a Pokeball in,
Okay.
but I wasn't sure if it would actually meet the criteria or not.
Yeah, it seems like you can submit anything for review. You just have to make a good case around it. So I don't know what the good case would necessarily be. Like a lot of these are sort of very literal things. But I guess because it isn't a real world object, that's where it comes into it. But they've got dragons and things too, so yeah, you could.
Well, they do, yeah. It seems to me anything that really fits into popular culture
Yeah.
is really what seems to be the main requirement. But I didn't actually know if there were requirements around specific brands. Like you weren't allowed to include any emojis that specifically promoted them.
No. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one. Like I said, I don't think there'd be any reason why you couldn't submit it. But then after it comes to review, the consortium might just shy away from it purely for the fact that there'd be other complications because the rights of that intellectual property are owned by someone else. And while I'm sure the Pokemon company would probably be very happy to have an emoji representing Pokemon, they would still have to work out that deal, and that might just be too much paperwork for people.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Actually, it would be a pretty involved procedure, and something that they should submit themselves. Probably not someone who's completely unrelated to anything to do with Pokemon.
So, Alex, although I cut it from last week's episode, I was kind of saying that probably would be a while until Amazon actually moved into Australia. Turns out they've actually just announced that they're moving in and starting a big factory, big warehouse in South Dandenong in Melbourne. And they're starting hiring people right away. When they'll actually start operating is still to be determined, but yeah, moving in a big way.
This is interesting actually because you've provided an article here from news.com.au titled "Amazon to bring hundreds of jobs to Melbourne" by Frank Chung. And as you said, they're going to open a very big factory and it will bring hundreds of jobs. But my understanding of it is it will also put quite a lot of strain on the retail industry, the existing retail industry in Australia, and potentially lose a lot of people their jobs because, as we know, Amazon is a very well-established company, and one of their key points is they provide convenient shopping through an online kind of facility. And while this article is saying that hundreds of jobs will be created in Australia, I think really the point is they're probably going to cause more people to lose their jobs than they are to create jobs.
That's certainly a valid concern and something that the media in Australia has been talking about a lot and has been reflected in market prices for various retailers.
Yes, absolutely.
That Amazon coming in is certainly going to put the squeeze on them.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably always inevitable that they would come over. But I mean, Costco's been here for a while and some other retailers, and they haven't had they have had an impact, but they haven't had a huge impact, I suppose. I mean, Dick Smith went away, I suppose.
Well, I think they've just been unable to break into the market in the way that Amazon would, because Amazon's presence sits online, and they're already quite a well-known brand from the UK and the US, where they're really strongly established.
Yes.
Whereas when you talk about places like Costco, one of the things that makes them very strong is store location. And I think they've just been unable to actually establish any strong, big stores in areas that people are actually very familiar with, which are existing retailers that they would be in direct competition with, like Coles and Woolworths, to be probably two of the biggest, are very strongly established, and they kind of sit in our lives very strongly. And to kind of compete with that, I think Costco would have to actually bring themselves into the areas that Woolworths and Coles already sit in, which I think they would find very hard. But Amazon themselves, all they've got to do is create a strong online presence, which can be achieved through a marketing campaign, which has already started, obviously. With all the news stories that's going on about them and the fact that they're already affecting existing retailers so heavily, I think it'll be a completely different story to the whole Costco and other American brands coming into Australia.
Well, you might be right, Alex. We'll have to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, we will. But I mean, I don't know about you, but obviously, I know that you've already shopped on Amazon, and so have I. And certainly, when it comes to Australia, I'll probably continue to do so because they provide very good prices on a lot of electronics, and I think eBay will certainly see a huge decline in sales as well.
Yeah, and one of the other things that they're kind of known for and makes it very easy to shop with them, especially online, which, is their main deal, is their returns policy in that. They make it so easy to return anything that they sell to them, which can't really be said for the current retailers, or at least most of them. I know there's some clothing brands that do a good job of this, but across the board, especially in the electronic space, like trying to return something to Harvey Norman, while not impossible, not real easy.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Do you think that Amazon will provide the same list of items that they do overseas to the Australian market?
You'd have to imagine that they'll start smaller, but what that subset will be interesting. What do you think? Because they sell so many things on, the standard American Amazon. Everything, toilet paper to high-end laptops.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine they would start smaller as well, but I mean, we live in such a globalized world now that it shouldn't be that difficult for them to provide at least a decent amount of their current American inventory to the Australian market. Certainly, that's what would make them appealing as well. And that's what I think a lot of people are assuming they'll do, and that's why they'll have such a large impact on the Australian retail industry, which I suppose for a lot of people will be actually an unfortunate thing, but for you and me, we'll certainly benefit from it because we're not really directly related to any of that.
So, Alex, you want to talk us through your gambling system?
My gambling system.
Before we start, I want to say that I don't necessarily endorse gambling, and I think the idea of gambling systems are tenuous. But it's always fun to see what happens when you put math and sports together.
Yes, I'm in complete agreement.
And, it should always be done responsibly as much as that's possible. A little flutter here and there, I think, is fine. But obviously, more than that, and you can have some serious problems.
Yes, I'm in complete agreement with you there, David. For me, it's always been like I've never really gambled that much. I think on the Melbourne Cup, which is the big horse race here in Australia.
Absolutely. Just about every year I put a couple of bucks each way on a horse.
Exactly. Yeah. But if it becomes something that you ever actually want to make money out of, then it becomes a problem because the way the odds are tipped, you're not going to make money out of it if you try to take it. If you try to take it seriously, unless you're someone very special. I know that some people do professional gambling. And these are people that are obviously just, a little bit smarter than the odds that are put on the games. But for me, certainly I don't think I'm ever really going to get to that level. But having said that, we had a discussion a couple of weeks ago now, David, about a system that I had decided to come up with to try to make money off the local Australian sport AFL.
Yes.
Australian Football League.
Probably the biggest sport in Australia. We also have rugby and soccer that do reasonably well, but Australian rules football, if you want to look it up, we might explain it at some point what it is, but for the time being, just know that it is a very popular sport in Australia.
Yes. Basically, my system worked on the. It works off tips that we were originally getting from you.
Yes.
David, being the local expert between the two of us on AFL, but we were thinking of perhaps moving the tip recommendations to the experts who do football tipping in the which newspaper is it for? Herald Sun, is it?
One of the major Australian or Melbourne newspapers, The Age.
The Age, okay. And basically, the idea behind my system was that 50% of the total money that is bet, so in this case it was $20, is going to be put onto safe games. And the safe games are decided by either David or the majority of the age tippers. So if the majority of the people tip a certain way on a game that has one team at very low odds and another team at very high odds, then that is decided to be a safe game. So there are a total of 9 games per round, and whether it's 8 games are considered safe, or whether it's one game that is considered safe, 50% of the money goes on to that or those games. And then 35% of the remaining money goes on to the medium risk games. And these are, again, kind of decided based on the odds of the game and how many people are betting on them, on one particular team to win. And then there's a high risk game, which is very even odds, and no one's really sure which way the game's going to go. And 15% of the money goes on to this. So in total, you have 100% of the money, and it's split with a majority going on to safe games, and then a smaller portion going on to medium risk games, and then quite a low portion going on to high risk games. And my idea was that I would somehow beat the odds with this particular system, and make some money. So mostly, in fact, entirely, David came up with an Excel spreadsheet.
Well, no, it was you helped.
I helped a little bit.
Nice
but
Google Docs sheet.
Yes, a nice Google Docs sheet, and we kind of put some formulas into the sheet so that the winner could be just denoted with a Y, and the risk factor, or which category the game was going to be put into, was also entered into the sheet. And we saw if my system would work. And so far, we've had 2 rounds, two and most of a third round.
Yes.
And it's not doing so well.
Well, we haven't actually put the money on to bet, so this is just sort of theoretical.
Yes.
For the first round, which would have been round 18, for the $20 we would have got $13.50 back. So lost $6.50 there. And then for round 19, we did slightly worse. We would have got about $12.50 back, so $7.50.
So it hasn't been going
work to do. Although for the current round, we're up to 1988 with 2 games still to go. So we could be a chance for winning this one.
Well, this is honestly fantastic news, I think. It's just an example of the system finally working.
Yeah. So it works 1 out of 3 times.
Yes. Unfortunately. It doesn't work all the time.
We still need to run the numbers using the expert tips, though, and see if that makes a difference.
Yeah, so far we've just been using David's tips, and they haven't worked magnificently for us. I did have an idea that perhaps we could just bet on the safe games, because they still return an average of 15 to 20% per game. But the problem with that is the risk versus reward system doesn't really work out, because you're still potentially having a 20% return or an everything loss. And I know that when people talk about investing in the share market, you potentially have that risk. But really, it's very real when it comes to gambling. And just another illustration of what David was talking about in regards to gambling not actually being a rewarding activity at all. And you can win 5 bets in a row and then put everything on a 6th bet and lose it all. So really, while the system may seem appealing in some ways, I also very much recognise that it's not something that's ever going to get you anywhere unless you spend a lot of time on it, and unless you're actually very talented in the area of picking winners, I suppose, on games.
And even then, there's never any guarantee.
Well, exactly.
So really, if you enter into anything like this, I think you have to go with the attitude that if you lose everything you put into it, that's perfectly fine.
Yes.
Ideally, what you want to do is put a certain amount of money in, and then once you can take it out, and then just leave what you've got on top of it still in the system.
Yes, that would be the ideal way to bet. So you actually just make some winnings and then bet with the winnings and then try and build on that.
Yes.
But you may not even get that far. That is the fact of it.
No, so how did you come up with the percentages here? Is it something that you've read in the share market, or just something that felt intuitively right?
It was actually just a guess. I just thought that was a good starting point, and then I could work from there.
Dial in.
Yeah, well, exactly. So it was just a guess. I still think that, because I mean, really, if you want to look at returns on money, and if you can actually find a reliable system that provides returns on money, then a 20% return on anything is fantastic. But you've actually got to be able to, as far as you can go on these things, guarantee the 20% return. So for me, it was just more about exploring that, because I know that when you talk about investing in the share market, a lot of people talk about the returns that they're going to get on it, and 15 to 20% is about as good as you'll get when you're investing in shares. I mean, I know that when you talk about people like Warren Buffett, obviously he has achieved far beyond that. But for your everyday investor, probably that's about as good as you will ever expect to get, and it's honestly better than a lot of people will ever get. So I was just looking at the idea that maybe you could achieve that through a gambling system, but I think a system like that is already kind of taken into account when the bookmakers make their odds. So you're not ever really going to be able to play that system successfully.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's always rigged so far in their favor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a reason why gambling institutions, whoever provides these odds aren't out of business, because they give themselves enough leeway that they can afford to make a few mistakes and still come out very far ahead.
Really, to win in gambling, you want to be a bookie.
Yes, exactly.
Or a casino.
Well, that's it. Yeah. And I mean, even in casinos, you never get true odds. Apparently, the closest you'll get to a true percentage split with gambling is in a game called Baccarat. Baccarat, which I don't know how to play, but I have been to a casino, and when I was there, I was talking to one of the people who was manning the tables, and basically what they were telling me is, if you like the truest odds you'll get are in Baccarat, and it's not quite 50-50, but it's almost 50-50. And that just goes to say for everything else. I mean, there's roulette, which is, I don't know what the odds are there, but ridiculously low.
The best odds are almost 50-50. That's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's why they always come out ahead, because people don't go to the casino to play Baccarat. They go to the casino to play blackjack, or they go to a casino to play whatever else you play there. They go to the casino to put their money in the pokies. And yeah, all of those things, they just have a statistical improbability of you winning. And that's just the way it is.
Did you see that there's more legendary Pokemon coming out to Pokemon Go? Something you and Sam are potentially excited about?
Yes. Well, this is a very a topic that's very closer to Samantha's heart than to my heart, but still close to my heart. So there are legendary Pokemon now appearing in the Pokemon Go app. Now, in case everybody's forgotten about this, which they probably have, Pokemon Go was very big about a year ago, I think, when it first came out.
Yes.
Little over a year ago it came out. And, everyone was very excited because Pokemon's an awesomely fun game. But the mechanics of the game were quite strange. They didn't have the whole idea of having your Poke Buddy and training him up. And
what's a Poke Buddy?
Well, your favorite. Pikachu is a Poke Buddy. That's my lingo.
Original.
Poke Buddy isn't actually a thing, but you have a Pokemon,
okay.
and you catch them and you train them up, and then this. And
I
then
was
this
imagining
Pokemon,
it was like a Pokemon that just sort of hangs around with you and doesn't go back into the Pokeball, like Pikachu and Ash.
Yeah, okay. I mean that could be a Pokebuddy. But that was purely my lingo. I just want to stress that nobody has ever said. I'm sure that people have said Pokebuddy, but that was just my explanation of what certainly what I imagined the game would be, which is, Pokemon would be a fair bit rarer than they are. And you would actually go and catch your Pokemon. You go out into the wild and you catch your Pokemon, and then you'd train it up. So you'd walk with it. There might be some kind of feeding system to kind of keep it going, and then you'd actually have battles against other people. And for me, that would have been the most awesome part. But Pokemon Go wasn't like that at all. It was basically you go around and you farm Pokemon. So there are Pokemon everywhere, and it kind of has this little thing where you can go and throw Pokeballs at the Pokemon when they appear and catch them, and then you can train them up. But it never quite lived up to what I expected Pokemon to be. But at the same time, I'm having great fun playing it with Samantha, and the legendary Pokemon have started appearing. And David, I'm just about to confess something to you that I don't know. I'm not sure I want to confess on live podcast. Not that it's live podcast, on delayed podcast. I have actually spent money on Pokemon Go.
In-app purchase.
In-app purchases, yes. Which obviously is why they created it. And they have to make a profit out of it, and I completely understand that. And that's unfortunately how it should be. Like they should have money making systems inside these apps. To allow them to grow and to become better. But
I imagine their server costs are pretty high too, considering all the content is coming directly off the servers.
Oh, it's probably, yeah. But having said that, I'm pretty sure their servers are just potatoes with wires plugged into them, because the apps crash all the time. Oh my gosh, they're so buggy, and
they probably need to spend a bit more then.
Yeah. But that is my big confession for the podcast. I've spent money. I've sent money to Niantic.
Let's have a quick cooking corner.
Do you know something I've actually always thought of doing as well? I'd really love to do a cooking video, even though I can't really cook that well, and I wouldn't pretend to be able to. I just love to be able to do a video where I show people how to cook.
Well, that's something you could totally do. Have Alex's cooking channel on YouTube.
Totally could. Maybe I should do that, because I do have one or two recipes under my belt. Not that they're mind blowing, but yeah. Anyway, so this week I'm still using the oven, so it's still, I suppose, maybe got a roastish element to it. But this week I'm doing roasted vegetables with kind of a chicken breast with cream of mushroom soup on top of it. And it's just basically a really simple recipe that I used to have a bit when I was a kid, that Mum used to make, and I thought I'd try it now. So it's really easy. It's just vegetables with some chicken breast and some cream of mushroom soup on top that's been chucked in the oven for a while, and hopefully it'll be delicious.
Sounds pretty nice.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really
make
easy
the
as well.
cream of mushroom soup beforehand, or
so it's just the canned cream of mushroom soup. So literally what it is cream of mushroom soup, and then you put some cream in with it. And I've also put some peas and corn in with that as well. And then you put the chicken breast in the oven pan. In this case, I've just used a large skillet, and poured the kind of cream of mushroom soup and cream and corn and peas mixture on top of it, and bam! Then that goes in the oven for anywhere between half an hour to 45 minutes, depending on how long it actually takes to cook.
Going with the chicken more these days. I saw the photo of your chicken bits roast last week. It looked delicious.
Yeah, it actually worked out really well. But that was actually just pre-flavored chicken that I got from Coles, and just chicken bits, and we had mashed potatoes and I think some vegetables and a salad as well, and that was it. So it's just simple recipes, but really nice. And it's funny, like, because cooking's always for me been well, I've never been terrified of it. It's always been a bit daunting, you know? You kind of come home and you think, oh, do I really want to prepare anything that's going to be that nice? Or do I want to just, like for me, kind of a really easy staple has always been a steak or a chicken breast and some vegetables because it's easy, it doesn't take long, and there aren't many dishes that are generated by it. And, you know, like there are no steps. All you've got to do is just cook it and then you're done.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a bit plain. So it's nice to mix things up with recipes like this. But that's kind of a bit of a move away from the roast, and I think next week we'll have to go back to roast. I've been thinking I wanted to do another pork belly for a while, try and really get the crackling right. So that's probably going to be my next step.
Yeah, that's a bit tricky, isn't it?
Well, I think it's just about actually cooking the pork as you would normally cook it, and then at the end chucking it under a grill, and then that creates the crackling. And I think that because like there was a little bit of crackling that was kind of almost inadvertently created last time because I wasn't really trying for crackling, and I think just a bit more grilling and that'll come out perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe we'll go with my actual cooking videos, and I can show our listeners what I've got, which isn't a whole lot. I've got a tiny arsenal of cooking ideas.
Yeah, no, you should totally do that. Spruce up your kitchen.
On Saturday night, Samantha and I made I originally referred to it as a shepherd's pie, but we figured out the shepherd's pie is actually made with lamb mince and a kind of gravy. Whereas I make my, in inverted commas, shepherd's pie with a bolognese sauce and then mashed potato on top.
Bolognese sauce? I haven't heard of that one.
Well, that was actually how Mum always used to make it. I didn't realise that it was uncommon, but...
sounds nice.
I mean... It's a delicious combination, but because it's not actually shepherd's pie, we called it a Villetta pie, which and Villetta is kind of the Italian word for cottage, because we figured it was closer to a cottage pie because cottage pies actually use beef in their kind of sauce instead of lamb, with mashed potato on top, and so it's a Villetta pie.
Yeah, you should definitely make that one.
I will. That may actually be my first cooking corner video.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes with more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/17. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone that you think might also. And we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
So, Alex, I know your love of craft beer is strong. Did you see Dainton wins the, what was it, the best craft beer award in Adelaide?
I did indeed see that. Yes. I when I say I saw it, I didn't know about it before I read this article. But yeah, I did. It's very interesting actually because I do definitely enjoy craft beer. I wouldn't consider myself an expert in any way. Like I don't really know any of the large brewing companies very well, and I can't claim to have tasted a large variety of craft beer. But I think for me, really, what I do if I saw an article like this is I'd just go out and I'd try and find some Dainton beer so that I could try it. One thing I got from reading this article, which is Dainton wins champion beer in Adelaide by James Atkinson.
From Brews News.
From Brews News. Which is a fantastic site name. So one thing that I kind of got from this is just the variety of fantastic names that you get from these places.
Yes.
And also the fact that there are some beers that are still considered craft beers, but that I actually see around in pubs. A good example of this is Little Creatures, which are a brewing company based in I don't know where, but they do some delicious beer. And also Four Pines, which was named the champion brewery. So yeah, they've done very well, and it's it's nice to see good beer getting out and about.
Yeah, absolutely, especially from the smaller vendors. Have you heard of
Yes.
this Dainton company before?
I
Had
haven't
any
heard
of
of
their beer?
Danton. No, no, I haven't had any of their beer, but it's certainly on the radar for me. I have a place that I go to in Sydney that Samantha actually discovered, and I'll be heading back there, I reckon, to try and find some Dainton beer.
You'll have to report back after you've tried it.
Absolutely, yeah.